Okay, everyone. So everyone knows we are recording now. Good morning. This is second day of class, and this is the first remote or virtual day of class. And what we're focused on today, the biggest task at hand, is to complete this setting up your environment documentation. This is all the software that we're going to be utilizing this semester, along with the software settings. Okay, and so I wanted to kind of go through this step by step because I know for the most part everyone's going to be unfamiliar with this software and the installation process. Although several of these are just pretty straightforward, it can be confusing. So I just wanted to go through this on a recording and make it available to everybody. So I got a little table of contents here. Everyone that I'm aware of is on our Discord server. So the first step was already completed by everybody. So that's good. So the next step is to install Notepad++ and something called Git. And Git is a way of transferring files and working with what's called version control. And so we're going to submit our work, all your homework, all your labs, they're going to be submitted to me using Git. And so when I say transfer files, I'm saying take the files from your computer and turn them in online, kind of like a Dropbox. You could think of it like a Dropbox or like a Google Drive. There's a few other platforms out there where you can store your files online. Okay, and that's the most basic way that you could use Git as a way to, store your files online. And Git is the technology that's used to transfer the files, but the place that will store the files is called GitHub. Okay, so there's Git and then there's GitHub. GitHub is the website where everything is stored. Git is the technology that's used to transfer the files, but then it also does something called version control. And we don't really need to get into version control on the second day of class, but just realize it does more than just, takes files from your computer and put them online. There is a piece of software called Notepad++ with default settings. It does recommend an ad blocker. You'll notice here on my Google Chrome, I already have an ad blocker. So it does recommend this ad blocker. You can see I've already got it. But once you click on this ad blocker, you could see I already have it. I don't need to install it, but you would click on install. It's already running for me. So I went through the process of uninstalling everything first, besides my ad blocker. I kept my ad blocker on. But I did have a lot of this software already, so I uninstalled it just to go through this demonstration. The first tool is Notepad++. It's just like regular old Notepad. It just has... it's not just like regular Notepad. It's like Notepad with additional features. Thus, the ++. Probably just go to the latest release, which is 7.8.9. And you click on the green download button. And in my downloads, save it. And you get this little gotta drag everything over so that you can see it, but I'm just going through the steps, keeping everything default, not changing anything here. I don't need a shortcut on my desktop. All defaults. Okay, You can run Notepad++ just so you can see what it looks like. This is Notepad++ running. We're not going to use Notepad++ a ton, but it is used in the installation process of another tool that we use. So this is Notepad++. Welcome to Notepad++. We're not really going to save any of that. And so no questions so far, pretty straightforward stuff. Now, I'm going to click back a couple times. I've now installed Notepad. Now it says download Git installer from here. I wonder if I hit control click. If I hit control click, you'll notice it opens up in a new tab. I don't have to click back. So this is Git. You can see Git is a free open source version control system. I mentioned version control. So this is a tool that's used in the software development industry across the board, right? This is a very popular tool. I'm going to download the latest for Windows. And you'll notice it automatically starts the download. Let's read this. Start the installer. If prompted to create a global ignore file, allow it to create one. Select Notepad++ as the default editor, as you could see here. Enable file system caching and Git Credential Manager. So those are just some settings we want to make sure that we click on. Again, you're welcome to follow along, or you can come back once I put this back on YouTube and you can follow along later. I know a lot of people are on their cell phone. So, read all this. Next. Let's go ahead and keep that the default. Okay, this is where the default editor used by Git. Here I can use Notepad++. This is the recommended. We'll keep that setting. Keep OpenSSL. Default. Git Credential Manager. That's good. So the Git Credential Manager was a checkbox before. This is the old installer. The new installer, it's a radio button. That's why I wanted to kind of show you there's this install guide's a little bit dated. This installer has changed. File system caching is good. We're going to leave the symbolic links unchecked. So default, and we're off. Which version are we downloading? Desmond, are you talking about Git or Notepad? I downloaded the version that was on the top, the latest version at the top of the page. Okay. Waiting for this to install. No other questions so far. I am, when you watch this recording, you'll see that I'm in my basement. So I do have a little video of me, chatting up in the corner. And I just realized in the video, you could see the diaper boxes. told you I have a newborn daughter. Over my corner, I've got some empty diaper boxes. Every parent will tell you that you go through a ton of diapers, and I can verify that. They have newborn diapers, and then they go through size 1, then they go through size 2. And not that anyone cares about this, but I thought it was incredible that I have gone through over 1,000 size 1 diapers. And that's ridiculous. Okay, so we are done completing installing Git. There's some release notes. That's great. We're done with Git. Okay. So Git is the technology that allows us to have version control and transfer the files. Tortoise Get, let me hold down Control. Tortoise Get is for Windows. So if you're on a Mac, you can't use Tortoise Get. If you're on a Mac, I don't know that Notepad++, but that's okay. You don't need Notepad++ if you're on a Mac. You don't need Tortoise Get if you're on a Mac. If you're on a Mac, there's a different tool besides Tortoise Get that you can use. Again, I said yesterday that I recommend a Windows laptop or PC. If you're on a Mac, there's just something called the Git. I think it's called the GitHub client, and we can use the GitHub client. Tortoise Get is going to change our Windows. When you right-click on Windows, it's called like a context menu. And this is going to allow there to be a context menu to transfer your files using Git. And so right now, there's no GUI, graphical user interface, for transferring your files. I could do it with Dropbox, but we're going to use Tortoise Get instead. And so it says the power of Git in a Windows interface and Windows shell. So let's download this. Now, a lot of times the installer will just look at your machine and tell you got 64-bit processor or a 32-bit processor. If you type in my PC, then you can right-click and go to Properties, and it opens up a little dialog box. And I could see here that I've got a 64-bit operating system and a 64-bit based processor. So if you don't know if your processor is 32 or 64-bit, this is where Windows will tell you that under the system type. And then you want to download the 64-bit. If you got 64-bit processor, 32. If it says, if it doesn't say 64, you want the 32. So let me go ahead and download Tortoise Get. Desmond, if you can hear me, if you are you on a Windows or are you on a Mac? Okay, so Tortoise Get is downloaded. Look at the installer, see if there's any special. Install Tortoise Get using the default settings. Use your real name and your school email when prompted for your name and your email address. I'm not sure if you see those little dialog boxes popping up. Okay, so I'm going to run the first start wizard. So there's just some configuration settings where it's going to ask me for some. Okay, so it automatically found my path to Git, which is what I wanted. Okay, now again, use your name, and for you'll put your school email address. This is my outside of school email address, but you'll put your school email address. All of this is default. Hey Desmond, I will work with you after this, and I will see what's going on. I'll try and help you out, okay? Don't stress it right now. Just for now, you can follow the video, and we'll come back. What time will this be up on YouTube? I'm going to finish recording this, and I'm going to put it up on YouTube immediately. So as fast as YouTube can process it, you know, it'll be up by the end of class for sure. Okay, so it says now that you have Git and Tortoise Get installed, we need to make some small changes. Right click your desktop and go to Tortoise Get Settings. Right click. See, now this Tortoise Get was not here before, and neither was Git clone, and neither was Git create repository here. These are all part of Tortoise Get. So Tortoise Get Settings. All right. Select Git, verify that your name is your name and then your email is your school email. So here's select Git. Again, here's my name, here's my email, which will be your school email. Select Git Credential. So underneath Git, there's Credential. Set the credential helper to manager all Windows users. So this is the step that messes a lot of people up. So here I click on Credential. Here's Credential helper, and by default you can only see advanced. So this is why this trips a lot of people up. If you click Open Settings though, now when you click on Open Settings, now you could see Manager All Windows User. I believe that's the correct setting. Manager All Windows User. Click Apply. Click OK. Click OK. Now I want to double check my work here. Tortoise Get Settings. And then click on Credential. And now the Credential helper says Manager All Windows Users. Okay, that just makes it, all this is doing is setting up so that when you transfer your files from your computer to GitHub, that you don't have to put in your username and password every time. Okay, this is just going to essentially remember your username and password so that you don't have to type it every time. So that's what that setting does, and that's why it's useful. I mean, if you don't change that setting, it's not the end of the world, but it's also not as convenient. Right, I like having those credentials. Okay, so we've installed Git, we've installed Notepad++, we've installed Tortoise Get, we've configured Tortoise Get. Now we're going to install what's called our IDE, Integrated Development Environment. It's just a fancy acronym for basically the tool that we're going to use to write code. So the tool that's used, that's really gained popularity, I'd say in the last 2 to 3 years, is called Visual Studio. Specifically Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code has really taken off in popularity, again, in the last 2 to 3 years. So I'm going to go ahead and download Visual Studio Code. And we'll get installing that. So this is the popular tool. Once we start Visual Studio, there's a tab size setting that changes tab size to 2. And I can explain that once. Let me get this install going. Very fast reader. Always reminds me of The Matrix. The scene in the Matrix where he like holds his hand over a book and now he knows Kung Fu. I accept. Next. 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 Default. This tab size comes from a recommendation from Google, actually. So what it comes down to is all these different editors have different tab sizes. So when you press tab, obviously the cursor jumps over, and some editors it jumps over 2 spaces. Some editors it jumps over 5 spaces. And so there's no consistency between tab sizes. And so if you're writing code and I'm writing code and your tab is 2 spaces and my tab is 5 spaces, there's a lack of consistency there. So Google simply recommends it to be a tab size of 2. Again, that's not an important thing here, but we're going to do it anyways. That way we can have some consistent settings here. Now the one thing I didn't do in this document is say, obviously you could see there's Visual Studio settings, and then there's the tab size. So we got to get into Visual Studio settings. These are the release notes. I got some code open up there from before. Here's, let's see, Visual Studio settings. So to change this tab size, what I clicked on was this little gear down here called Manage. Then I clicked on Settings. And as I scroll down here, you can see the tab size is 4 by default. I'm just going to change this to 2. And again, that's just from something I read, Google coding recommendations. Nothing super critical.
Professor?
Sir?
Your screen size is a little small.
My screen size is a little small. Is it not full screen? What do you mean by it's a little small?
That might be on your end.
It's not full screen on my end.
Is it full screen on anyone else's? Let me go back to the chat room.
Yeah, it's full screen on mine.
Never mind, it was mine.
Okay, no problem. Again, hey folks, I realize I'm just getting into the chat here. Seems like some people, it's okay if you're not following along. That's why I'm recording it. So, I anticipated that, different people are going to have different challenges following along all at once. But I wanted to give a guide to everyone generally, and then what I'll have to do is I'll have to kind of help everyone individually troubleshoot whatever problems you may be having. But I do appreciate, it seems like you guys are kind of helping one another, and I do appreciate that assistance to work together and help. So thank you for that. Okay. Visual Studio tab sizes 2. Install the following extensions. Some of these extensions are very critical. For example, Live Server. Like you use that every single day, every time you run Visual Studio. Beautify we use all the time. Some of these extensions not so critical, but we're going to install them all anyways. So extensions are this little icon over here on the left, these little blocks. So you click on extensions, and I have some extensions installed But I'll go through the process of installing these anyway. So the first one is called Prettier. So Prettier Code Formatter. So what you do is you search for it, and then you just click on Install. And we get the little install bar. And when that turns into a gear, that means that it's installed. So pretty simple to install an extension. So we're just going to go down the list. The next is Beautify. And you can see I already have Beautify installed. So you probably don't. So you just click on the green install button. Eslint is a tool for helping us with our JavaScript when we get to the second half of the class. So install Eslint. Code spell checker is really nice. You know, help us find typos and misspelling in our code that we're writing. So install that. Next up is npm by egamma, because there's going to be several options there. npm. So this top one is by egamma, so let's install that. JavaScript code snippets. Again, some of these we'll be using right away. Some of these we'll be using the second half of the class. VS Code icons. VS Code icons. CSS Peak. Now when I installed VS Code icons, this little drop down box happens and it wants you to select VS Code icons for the file icon theme. Basically this is what the icons look like in Visual Studio, so nothing. Just you select that and then you're done. CSS Peak, and we'll use that when we're writing CSS to look at the HTML like quickly. So it's just a way to navigate back and forth between HTML and CSS quickly. Live server is really important. Again, I already have live server installed. That's going to be how we view our web pages. Debugger for Chrome. You can see here debug JavaScript code in Chrome. And last one is AYU. And this is just themes for Visual Studio, like dark theme, light theme. You can see a bunch of different themes. I got the dark. It recommends Mirage, but you can play around with that and change your Visual Studio theme. So those are the extensions that we needed to install. And now we get to configure some extensions, okay? Once I get past configure extensions, I'm going to kind of take a little break here. I'll give you guys a 10-15 minute break. I'll pause the recording, and I'll try and help people who are stuck or you know, behind, and everyone can take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish this up. But I am going to get through configure extensions first. Under the extensions window, click more action and select show installed extensions. So let's go ahead and clear the extensions. Click on More Action, and this is changed a little bit in Visual Studio, but you can see here the installed are checked. I'm going to uncheck recommended. So now we're only looking at our installed extensions, and you can see obviously these are just what we went through and installed. So we got this view here. Click the gear icon for the live server extension and select Configure Extension Settings. So we're going down to Live Server. Here's the gear. And here's Extension Settings. Change the host from 127.0.0.1 to localhost. So down here is our live server host. Change that from that to localhost. Again, this is just something that helps us out a little bit later in the JavaScript, a little bit later in the class. This is just I came across this one time when I was teaching the class where students were hitting an error, and I fixed the error by doing this, and so now I just have it in the setup so that you don't encounter that error. Press enter. It says it will auto save. If you want to double check that, we can double check it. Extension settings. There's localhost. It did save. Okay, in Prettier code formatter, select configure extension. So let's go to Prettier. Extension settings. Now this says reload required. Please reload Visual Studio. Well, I'm going to do that real quick because let's close Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code. So I went ahead and reloaded Visual Studio. Go back to my extensions. Prettier, extension settings. Okay, now I've got the extension settings showing up. Print width to 120. So I click on Prettier. So I had to click on this Prettier down here. Here's the print width 120. Hit enter. Saved. Change the single quote checkbox. Let me go back into that. I did not do that. Click on Prettier. Single quote. We'll use a single instead of double quote. Okay. So again, those setting changes are very minor. Nothing major as far as that goes. But we are at a point where we have a lot of software installed already. And then the next step is to get into GitHub Classroom. So this is a good point for a break. I'm going to close that. I like to pin this, so you can right click and pin to the taskbar so that when you close it, the icon stays open down here, this little blue icon, so you can get to that quickly. So let me go ahead and pause the recording. And okay, we're back recording after a little break. The step that we left off on is registering at GitHub Classroom and creating what's called a repository. So GitHub Classroom is going to be where you turn in all your assignments to me. When I say all your assignments, your homework, your lab work, and your hands-on tests, pretty much everything. And so this is a new software that you'll have to get familiar with. It's different, but so there's a little learning curve to it, but you'll adapt, and it's a very useful tool to get used to. And so the first thing to do is on GitHub. Remember, GitHub is the website where you submit your files to. And Github Classroom is just a space where I can manage all of your files in one place. And so if I paste this, and I'm using Edge, Internet Explorer, I'm already logged in, so I need to log out, because this is going to be what you see. If I go here and I'm logged out, you might see this screen. Let's go ahead and authorize the app, because one of the first things you'll need to do is create an account. And of course it keeps wanting to log me in. I don't want to log in. So at some point, I'm not sure that you're gonna follow the exact same steps that I am, but you're gonna need to create an account. And so if we click on sign in here, of course it's automatically signing me in. There should be a register button, and you'll just create an account. I don't know, it's too smart. It's too smart, and it knows my credentials because I just logged in. Let me think about this. Let me look. Because as soon as I go to sign in, it knows who I am, and there's no register button. So you guys should have a register button. You can see I automatically sign in. So what you're going to do is you're going to create an account, and normally when you create an account, a lot of people use their gamer tag, but obviously if I got a classroom full of gamer tags, I'm not going to know who's who. So please, when you're making a username, use your first name _ last name. If you have a generic name like that is already in use, you can add some numbers to it. Tom _ Smith 2020 or something to that extent. And so I can recognize who is who by their username, and I don't get a bunch of gamer tags. So that would be appreciated. So here you can add a username if needed. Don't use your gamer tag. Once you create your account, you might have to go back to the link, and there will be a list of all of your names, and you'll click your name, and when you click your name, it will create an online repository similar to this. So this is several steps that I'm not able to demonstrate right now because of this basically automatic authorization. But once I click on this, this is kind of the end step. Like once you get to here, you've created your account, you clicked your name from the list, and this creates an online repository. And a repository is just a folder. And you can see inside of this online repository, there's a bunch of other folders that you'll essentially download this. And so there's an online, so the terminology is there's an online repository, and then you're going to download it onto your computer, and you're going to have a local repository. And so when you make changes to your local repository, then you push it, is the language that we use. You push it up to the online repository. And when you do that push, that's essentially submitting your work. All right. And so that's the process, and I wish I could demonstrate it. If I had, maybe I can download Firefox real quick, because Microsoft Edge is automatically, you don't need Firefox, so you don't have to download Firefox. But I'd like to demonstrate just part of the process that I'm not demonstrating right now. So I might take a few steps back. So let me install Firefox again. You don't have to do this. Just see if I can get it to show that step. Okay, this is Firefox. Okay. So you'll click on, when you go to that link, you'll click create an account. Again, username is first name underscore last name and some numbers. Email address is obviously your school's email address. Please remember your password. Please, please, please remember your password. It's pretty hard if you forget your password, but that's normal, happens to all of us. So once you create your account, you'll get a verification email, so you'll have to verify your school's email address more than likely. Then you can sign in. Now, my GitHub account, my credentials are stored on a password manager. My username is EA Guttenstead. Password is this. Okay, then it brings me here. This is the screen that I showed you before. I'm pretty sure you'll have to select your name from the list at this screen. But since I've already done this, I didn't get to select my name from the list. Okay. The next step, I was able to demonstrate that a little bit more, still not complete. The next step in the guide is to clone the repository onto your local computer. And so that is done by clicking this green code button and clicking this copy button. And what you're going to do, again, so the process here is you've got an online folder with a bunch of files in it, and we're going to download that essentially. You could call that cloning. You're going to download it and make a local version of that folder. And so to clone it, you click on the green code button and then you copy the URL. And then you got to think about, where do you want this local folder? I'm going to put it, I've got a folder here called All Student Work. Let me, I've already gone through this process once just for testing purposes, and so I got to undo the work that I already did. Let me clear this out. So I'm going to put my local repository inside of this folder called All Student Work. So I'm going to pretend like I'm a student here. And so if I go back to github.com and I go to my repository here, this is that repository. Click on the green code button, click on copy. So that copies this URL. Click that button. You're going to go over to, again, this can be on your desktop, this can be in My Documents. The location on your hard drive is up to you. But you're going to right click the folder and click on Git Clone. Again, this is a Tortoise Get option. And you'll notice when you have that URL copied, it automatically pastes it right here. So it pastes it in this URL box. And then this is this is the online URL. This is your online repository. This is going to be your local repository. And you'll notice this is the full path on your hard drive to that folder. So all you have to do here is click OK. But I'm just showing you what's in those boxes. Click OK. Now, more than likely, it's going to ask you for your username and password again here. This is part of the complication if you don't remember your username and password, that you don't get very far in this process if you don't remember your username and password. Let me scan for questions while this is copying. Seems like we're good. So essentially what this is doing is it's downloading all the files. And it's setting up this folder to essentially be a mirror of what's online. And when you change what's on this folder, then you push the changes onto your online repository. So here you can see a bunch of folders. For example, here's lab, HTML chapter 1 lab. And you could see a web page here that's just empty. This web page is just a holder for you to write code in. Okay, so I now have a local repository. This local repository is a mirror or a clone of an online repository. And when I make changes to anything in these folders, I make any changes in this folder whatsoever, you have to replicate those changes to your online repository. That's called pushing. You push your changes to the online repository. So I'll show you how to do this, and this is going to be how you submit your work. And there's a couple of methods to do this. I'm going to show you the easiest. So I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code, and I realize you haven't used Visual Studio Code before, so this is new probably to everybody, or most people. What you can do is you can open a folder in Visual Studio Code. So if let me just open up my repository. So here's again, I put it on my desktop, and then I said all student work. Remember, and here's the default name, all web dev coursework with your username behind it. And I could just select that folder. Now, here you guys see some Visual Studio icons, right? We installed that extension that makes these fancy little icons here. And you can kind of navigate the folders, and there's that file And when I click on that file, you see over here that I can write some code. Now, that's, again, all web dev coursework. I can close the folder, and you notice it goes away. So File, Open Folder, all web dev coursework. It opens it back up. But if I don't want to work with that folder anymore, File, Close Folder, and it goes away. I normally don't open up the entire repository because normally I'm not working with everything. Like normally I might be working with labs. And then I might work with Chapter 1 lab. Okay? Select Chapter 1 lab. Now I just have the Chapter 1 lab folder open. I don't have all the extra stuff that I don't need. I just have that one Chapter 1 lab. And I'm not going to write any code yet. I'm just going to say hello world. And actually I'll put it in a... There's more needed here. Obviously this is not good HTML, but I'll put the word hello world and I'll put it inside of this thing called an H1 tag. So this is an opening tag and a closing tag, and this is just a little HTML. And then I can right click on this page and open with live server, and you can see it pops up. Now the web page says hello world. And so now that file called index.html, when you look at it in a browser, I can even go through here, because if I launch it in Visual Studio, open with live server, it says hello world. Or if I look at it from the folder view, I can go into labs, Chapter 1 lab. There's a little file. I can double click it. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to open up in Chrome and say hello world. So a couple ways of opening that file. The whole purpose of this, though, was to show you how to submit that work to me. And you'll notice here over on the left is something called source control 1 pending change. And so I'm going to click on that, and this is going to be how you submit your work. And there's 3 steps using this tool. I'm going to outline the steps. I'll zoom in here. So the 3 stages here, there's really 3 things: stage, commit, and push. Staging is a way to, if you don't want to push everything all at once, you could say, okay, I want to stage these 5 files. If you're working on stage files, for the most part, you're going to stage them all. So you'll notice over here, there's this little plus button. So I'm going to click on stage changes. I only have 1 file to push, so I'm going to push this 1 file. So, or if you got a bunch of files, you could click on this plus button, which stages all. Like if you got 10 files here, either way, we're going to stage. So step 1 is stage. So you can see now I have stage changes. So stage changes is first. Commit, this creates a save point. Think of like a video game save point. And so on your computer, you're creating a save point for this file. So that if you ever want to roll back the file to a prior version, that's what a commit does. You can roll back your commits to prior versions of the files. That's why it's called version control. So the message is important. I want to encourage you guys to write descriptive message. So I'll say updated Chapter 1 lab. And so you give it a message, and then you click the check mark to commit. Okay, so a lot of students mess up because they commit, which is a local save, but they forget to push that to their online repository. Remember, the push is essentially how you get it off of your computer and onto GitHub. And so that is done. That is done right here. So you can go to pull push. You click on push. And you give it a second. That's fine. Okay, so now you could see that I did this 8 days ago. If I go back to my online repository, this is how you could tell that it worked. I now have a message here that inside of my labs folder that I updated chapter 1 lab. You can see this happened 1 minute ago. So ultimately, to make sure that you submit your work, you want to go to github.com, go to your repository, and make sure that that's there. Now, you could click on the labs folder here. You could click on the lab folder here. You could click on the index file, and you could see the code that you wrote. So that's the process of turning in your work. Now, here shortly, I'm going to ask that everyone at least practice pushing just like this. If you want to go into your chapter 1 lab, index.html, write this little line of code and push it, and this will be after the recording is over. I'm going to work with you to make sure that you can submit your work on GitHub, and this will be my working with everyone to get to this point where you can submit your work. Okay, again, so that's the process. It's all recorded, so you can come back again. 3 steps. Step 1 is stage. Step 2 is commit, which is a local save, and you give it a message like finish chapter, whatever lab, or finish the homework for whatever chapter. And then step 3 is push, and that's going to take your local changes and change the online repository as well. Scanning for questions, no questions. Let's go back to the document here, finish that. Okay, last couple of things here on the installation. At school, we have a docking station. You might have saw that yesterday. The docking station allows anyone with a laptop to come in, and through a USB port, through their USB port, they can get an extra monitor. They can get a network connection. If we have a keyboard and mouse, if you don't want to use a trackpad and mouse on your laptop, you can get a trackpad and mouse. You can bring that in and plug it into the docking station. And so it's just a way to work a little bit more comfortably. And there's drivers for this docking station. Now you click on the link here, and basically if you have a Windows machine, you're going to click on this zip file, save the zip file. We're almost finished up here. Okay, so I clicked on the zip file. A zip file needs to be extracted. So I'm going to click extract all and click extract. So that's unzipping. And then you run this setup.exe. and I'm not going to run it. I already have the docking station drivers installed, but it's all defaults. So click through the defaults, and that will enable you to work with the docking stations at school. The next tool is Balsamic. Balsamic is a wireframe tool that allows you to sketch apps. It allows you to sketch websites. It's a tool that we used throughout the curriculum here at Rankin. And we do have a trial version of it, and so you'll download Balsamic, and we'll use it in this class. You'll use it more in other classes, but we do use it a little bit. So I have an older version of Balsamic, so this is good for me to update my version. And here is the key, and this will give you a trial until the end of 21. I'll show you where to insert the key. So let's launch Balsamic. So this is the wireframe tool. You go to Help, you click on Register. This is where you paste your license key. Okay, you may continue to work on your projects until your trial period ends. Happy wireframing. Your trial has been extended. And so we should be good to go there. That's all we had to do with Balsamic. And finally, Node. Node is something we will do in third semester. We might utilize Node a little bit in this class, but as you can see, install the long-term service, click on here, save, and just default settings for Node. Default install. And that's the last of the installation guide. So we're going to let this finish up, and then I'm going to stop the recording so I can get it processing on YouTube. The plan for the rest of today is between 10 and let's say 11:15. I'm going to let everyone work through this installation guide. Okay, at 11:15 we're going to review for tomorrow's written test. And so if I open up the syllabus just as a reminder, tomorrow's our first grade, which is a written test. Okay, so last night I asked you to read chapter 1, which was on Inside Rankin. Or if you had the textbook, the lab for today. Okay, now if you turn in your work to me at all, then you've completed your lab, because your lab for today is to complete the document that this video was all about. Okay, so if you turn in any work at all to me this semester, then I know that you've cloned your GitHub repository and I know that you followed these steps. Okay, so this lab for chapter 1 is to complete this document here. This is not technically due until Friday. You see, this lab is due on Friday at the beginning of class. Okay, so if you don't get it done today, it's okay. But it is technically due by Friday. So I will have a lab grade for you for completing this document. I know a lot of students, are working on their, buying a laptop or getting their environment, getting the right hardware in place. So it's not due tomorrow or anything. Tomorrow we do have a written test at the beginning of class, and at 11:15 I'm going to do a review. So now that Node is done, I'm going to stop the recording. I will work with you guys to answer any questions between now and 11:15. If you're done, if you've got this lab installed, you can kind of take a break for a little extended break, and I will be back here at 11:15 to do a review. So I'm stopping the recording now.